Welcome, everybody, to the Brickyard podcast, going over everything AFC and NFC North. We go over the latest free agent news and pending, as well as the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight, and all things NFL, NBA, and then some. Welcome into the Brickyard podcast.
Yeah, welcome into the Brickyard podcast. We are going to have probably some live reactions because we are recording this at 1 o'clock. 12 o'clock is when free agency went live today, and we already had some massive news breaking, and that is Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos, one of the worst contracts of all time, one of the worst trades of all time by any team ever. Yeah, you heard that right. The Denver Broncos will have not one, not two, not 40 million, not 50 million, but $80 million in dead cap just because that's how bad Russell Wilson was to their organization. So they said, no, we're just going to cut you, get rid of you now, get the cancer out of the locker room. And then what does Pittsburgh do? Well, they're like, oh, we like washed up, mediocre quarterbacks. We tried our luck with Mitch Trubisky. We said we liked Mason Rudolph. We drafted Kenny Pickett simply because he went to Pitt and his name Pickett is close enough to Pittsburgh there. But now Russell Wilson is going to be there for $1 million as the next Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback with 13 touchdowns last year, 26 touchdowns this year, last year he had 15 his first year in Denver, then he had 26 there. Kenny Pickett has only had 13, so they've struggled at quarterback. Do you think this is a solution, or do you think you should try and get someone in the draft this year and then maybe let Russ, get benched?
I think that it's a fine move for them in the short term. Only $1 million. You're not paying him very much, and his ceiling is like bringing them to the playoffs, which is what they did with Mason Rudolph last year. Can he make their offense better? I mean, their offense couldn't get any worse. We call them the Guantanamo Bay Steelers for a reason, because Kenny Pickett, for some reason, watching the Steelers play offense last year was eye-gruelingly bad everywhere across the board. Do I think Russell Wilson will make it better? Slightly. Maybe then from Guantanamo Bay, maybe they go to Alcatraz next. Maybe it's a slight upgrade. But overall, I mean, low risk, low return. Like, I think their ceiling is probably a playoff game. But other than that, like, their solution is not going to be Russell Wilson. He's 35 years old. We saw how much he fell off his last season in Seattle. And then his 2 years in Denver were a complete disaster. This year, they salvaged somewhat of his marketability. He's going to get paid $1 million, and then the Broncos are still going to pay him $38 million to not be on their team. But in the short term, sure. If he's going to be a mentor, then why not?
Yeah, I think he could be a mentor because you could definitely see the Steelers going for someone like a Bo Nix or a JJ McCarthy in the draft here. So I think that could be a good move to the Steelers. And I'm not saying he's as bad as this player, but like it could be a similar situation to when Cam Newton went to the Patriots, where he was kind of at the tail end of his career, had some washed up years in Carolina, and then decided to try his luck with the New England Patriots there. And I think with Russell Wilson, where you're going to a team that wins every single year, probably have a good vibe with Mike Tomlin in the locker room there, and then the person it works the most for is going to be Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, because Russell Wilson is going to be checking the ball down to them regularly. They have an offense catered more towards Russell Wilson, where you have two good running backs there, and then George Pickens is better than Jerry Jeudy. He's better than Cortland Sutton, at least talent-wise there. So if Russ can get him the ball and at least force feed him the ball, I think that could help the Steelers a lot, because like, not a believer in Kenny Pickett, definitely not a believer in Mason Rudolph. So I think now is the time where, okay, Kenny, you're either going to sit behind Russ and compete with him, and that'll bring the best out of you, or you're going to fold and we're just going to draft another quarterback next year. But I think the Steelers are kind of in a weird situation because Mike Tomlin, contract negotiation year. So this is a lot of chips on the table for Tomlin, and then the Steelers kind of just still figuring it out in the post Big Ben era, and they still haven't had someone play better for them than the zombified corpse of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and plus one other thing that makes me nervous about the Steelers is they went and hired Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator.
Yes.
And we all know how his time in Atlanta was. Didn't know how to utilize Bijan, didn't know how to utilize Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and all the talent that they have there. Do I have faith that he can do that in Pittsburgh? Not really. I mean, George Pickens, we've seen the exceptional talent from him, but he hasn't been able to quite eclipse what he's capable of. And with Deontay Johnson, he's a guy that his ceiling is like, 1,000 yards. He's up for contract. Will they trade him? They're taking offers on him now. But I don't trust the Steelers to be able to make it over the hump when they have the Ravens, the Browns, and the Bengals in their division. So a lot of things to go over today. We'll go over the AFC North and the NFC North, but Russell Wilson as a Steeler, and then also the Mac Jones era is over in New England, giving up a 6th-round pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars, to have a solidified backup in Mac Jones. What was your first initial thoughts on this move?
The first initial thought I had about this move was, first of all, it's crazy that there were 4 teams in the mix for Mac Jones, and the Jaguars decided to outbid them with a 6th-round pick. And we already did our Jacksonville Jaguars offseason preview, and I said, you know what the Jacksonville Jaguars needs is dogs all over their team. They need that dog vaccination, because I didn't see it anywhere last year. You completely fell apart when you could have just coasted to the number 1 seed. And then your solution to that is bringing in Mac Jones, someone who is in the same draft class as Trevor Lawrence, someone at Alabama who probably felt slighted that Trevor Lawrence was talked about more highly than he does. How is that going to work when you have 2 guys on the same team from the same draft that competed in college against each other? So Mac Jones is going to be in his head like, oh, I'm an equal to Trevor Lawrence. And every situation and every article coming out of New England has said Mac Jones isn't the best locker room presence. And it's not like he's a guy who's just going to sit there and coast. I get it. Trevor Lawrence had injury issues last year, but when you're talking about a team who needs really a mentor for Trevor Lawrence, someone more like a Nick Foles or a Gardner Minshew, not someone who played with him in college, who's going to have in the back of my mind, like, I think I was on the same level as this guy in college and could legitimately compete with him and take his job, where Trevor Lawrence is clearly above him. And then it's also like, you need to add leadership, you need to add mentors, and you need to add dogs. And most importantly, you need to fucking sell tickets, because no one wants to go see a Jacksonville Jaguars game in Jacksonville. People only move there to extend their retirement money because there's no state income tax there. So if you didn't have the biggest IRA, they're like, oh, guess I'll move to Jacksonville. Florida, it's cheap to live there, low state income tax. So it's a bunch of old people that don't want to go see football games anymore.
And they also don't want to socialize either.
No.
But luckily for the Jaguars fans, if they were to make it to there and have that 25% occupancy, they'd be able to grace their eyes with Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, and now Gabe Davis, friend of the show, allegedly.
Enemy of the show.
3 years, $50 million. And when I saw this deal, I immediately just laughed. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because you talked about your dog vaccination, and their first 2 moves of the offseason, when they need an alpha in the room, they signed Mac Jones, Macklemore Jones, and then they signed Gabe Davis, who is an enemy of the show. We have ripped him time and time again because we think that he is one of the most overrated wide receivers in the NFL. Based on the playoff game with the Chiefs a few years ago, he had that 4-touchdown game, and ever since, everyone thought of him as a number 2. Well, now he's a number 2 to Christian Kirk. He should be a number 3 somewhere. I guess my prediction of him going to the Panthers did not pan out, but the night is still young. They will sign somebody and overpay for them. I promise you that. Gabe Davis to the Jaguars.
Yeah, Gabe Davis to the Jaguars as well. And this is another thing I said. It's like, you need to get a dog in the room, not someone that you can take a coin, flip it, and that's the odds that he has of catching a pass in the NFL as a receiver, making $50 million to pay a game there. Then everyone's like, oh, well, Gabe Davis had 4 receiving touchdowns in a game against the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead, and I say, so did Chris Hogan at one point in his career. I've seen many guys who aren't elite receivers have magical games. Gabe Davis has never had an 1,000-yard receiving season in the NFL. And then you're making Christian Kirk, who is a good, really, really, really good 2 as your number 1 receiver now. You whiffed on Calvin Ridley. You had drop problems with the receivers. You had spatial awareness where they weren't catching touchdowns because they weren't aware where their feet were. And now you add Gabe Davis to the mix. Please go Google a compilation of Jaguars receivers stepping out of bounds or dropping passes last year, and it not all of it, was on Trevor Lawrence. Sometimes he's just hitting guys in the hands. They're flat out dropping it. And your solution to that is Gabe Davis, who you can flip a coin and decide if he's going to catch it or not. Like, what are we doing?
Coin toss Gibby. That's what they're doing there. So Gabe Davis to the Jaguars. We had some other big moves happen in free agency as well. Tony Pollard replacing Derrick Henry in Tennessee. 3 years, $24 million. What was your first reaction to him signing with the Titans and becoming allegedly the number one back there?
So you replaced an older, semi about to be washed up running back with a older, younger-ish, semi washed up running back who really was overrated in Dallas, and I don't think he's the solution there, but you have now a trend that has been established with the Tennessee Titans. They sign old receivers and they sign washed up Cowboys running backs. You signed DeMarco Murray about a decade ago, and now the lore continues with signing Tony Pollard. Is this going to be a bad move for them? I mean, $24 million over 3 years is actually a pretty team-friendly deal. And then you have Tajay Spears in the backfield. So if you can draft another running back, maybe you have a good carousel there. So I think he'll be a fine running back. Is Tony Pollard ever going to be a one on a team? No, but 3 years, $24 million, it's okay. It's okay for someone like Will Levis to have someone to check down to. So now you have two pretty good running backs. It's like the same level as Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think the thing is I feel like both of them have a similar play style.
Yeah.
Where Tony Pollard is more of a receiving back. Same with Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears kind of an elusive back. If they can go out there and draft maybe a more big physical running back, kind of like what the Jags were trying to do last year with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, they end up getting Dearness Johnson and end up working out just fine. If they can get a big physical running back as their third back, then I think they'll be fine. But it doesn't really move the needle too much for me.
Yeah, the rumor is that the Bengals could cut Joe Mixon. You hired their offensive coordinator to be your head coach right now, so maybe you add Joe Mixon there if he doesn't decide to go to the Cowboys, which I could definitely see Mixon doing there. But overall, Tony Pollard, that's a fine signing there. The signing I really do like, though, is Christian Wilkins. Absolute dog on the show. I went on a rant when we had our Dolphins preview about how much of a dog that Christian Wilkins is. He was single-handedly keeping the defense alive when everyone else was getting hurt. You had Melvin Ingram hurt. You had Bradley Chubb, who was hurt, and then Jalen Ramsey was injured for a bit. And then towards the end of the season, Christian Wilkins was the glue holding that defense together. And now he signs a 4-year, $110 million deal to go to those Raiders.
I love it, especially pairing him with Max Crosby. We're talking about a team whose last year, the last half of the season, had one of the best defenses in the NFL. This is a team that everyone's going to be sleeping on going into the season. I think the Raiders are actually going to be pretty good, especially if they get their quarterback right. That defense is going to be a problem for them.
Yeah, I think they're going to be better than the Chargers, and that was my prediction coming into the offseason, especially because you have Antonio Pierce, players, head coach, John Harbaugh. He's transitioning back into the NFL. I know a lot of people who are friends with him and have them on their show personally like him a lot and like to pump him up, but we still need to see him go out there and do it. With Antonio Pierce, I saw that defense really respond to him. At the end of the year, they had one of the best defenses in the league. Now you're putting an absolute dog in the middle with an absolute dog on the outside with Max Crosby, and now you get a chance to draft another really good pass rusher. I mean, that defense is going to be elite, and if you can add, I don't know, Justin Fields to the mix, great team. Great team.
Yeah, and they're taking calls on Justin Fields. Will he go? They're looking at Denver. They're looking at Oakland potentially, so a lot of places there. And then another signing, this is kind of a smaller signing, but DeAndre Swift signs with the Bears for, ironically, the same money that the Bears had lost David Montgomery to last year, because the Lions ended up signing him for 3 years, $24 million. Same goes with D Swift going to the Bears. So they kind of swapped running backs there.
Yeah, they kind of swap running backs. If I'm the Bears, I sit him probably the first 13 weeks, so you have him for the last 6. That's about as much production you're going to get from Tony Pollard. So, or not Tony Pollard, D Swift there. So I don't know. Tony Pollard again. D Swift is really someone who hasn't been that impressive. He has these flashes and he has these moments, but you'll be like, okay, he was really good in the first half of the season. And then once you get to the second half, you're like, oh, I forgot D Swift was even on the team.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a good signing. I would still draft another running back because Khalil Herbert's nice. Justin Fields is probably going to be gone there, so you lose that running back too. And now you have D Swift, who really only gives you 4 to 6 good games a year.
Yeah, and then other than that, pretty mediocre. Any other major signings before we go into the
Yes.
gauntlet?
Yeah, so I want to go over two quick major re-signings that I really love a lot. First of all, Kansas City Chiefs lock up Chris Jones
Massive.
for 5 years, $95 million, making him the highest paid defensive tackle, I believe, in NFL history at this point. So shout out to Chris Jones, phenomenal defensive tackle.
Friend
You
of the
are
show.
the best player on defense at this point at the defensive tackle position. Aaron Donald's taken a step back here, but you were a pivotal piece for the Kansas City Chiefs. So happy to see him go back to KC and get a bag to do it. And then also Michael Pittman. Congrats to him. He got another bag. Had a great season last year. Career year for the Colts. Really excited to see what Indy does the rest of free agency. So two key major re-signings that I love to see for both of those teams.
What I like about the Michael Pittman deal, especially, is it doesn't handicap the Colts and getting someone like T. Higgins or going out and drafting another one. They have Josh Downs on a rookie deal, Anthony Richardson as well. They just signed Jonathan Taylor. And with this deal with Michael Pittman, the floor is 15 million and the ceiling is right around 23, 24 million. So they still have a lot of room to grow. Michael Pittman has a chance to be making top wide receiver money while also being locked up and having that security. So didn't think it's a great signing. They also signed Zaire Franklin to a 3-year deal as well.
Yeah, also signed Zaire Franklin. So Colts are doing a lot of good things right now. Like seeing that with Michael Pittman. And then, yeah, we did also have one other thing we can go over. The probably premier receiver right now is T. Higgins because he has officially asked for a trade. Bengals tagged him. He was like, come on. Seriously, you're going to tag me after Jamar Chase goes down with an injury. When that happened over that stretch of time, T. Higgins was not the fifth, not the fourth, but the third best receiver in the NFL when Jamar Chase wasn't there. This guy has been the sleeping giant on the Bengals. Everyone talks about Jamar Chase. Everyone hears the name called of Tyler Boyd, but it's just like T. Higgins. Not a lot of people give him the love he really deserves, but this is a guy who could be a number one on most of the teams in the NFL. He's officially asked for a trade from the Bengals. However, Bengals will be able to definitely get some capital back. You'll be able to get some draft picks, so you can also draft another receiver, which they are absolutely electric at doing. Drafted Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, I believe
Tyler Boyd, too.
Tyler Boyd, I believe Mohamed Sanu as well.
Yep.
So they're definitely fine drafting receivers there. So I think T. Higgins, premier target for any team that is wide receiver needy.
Yeah, and I think that the two spots that I think you both can agree on is either the Colts or the Texans. Those two, I think, would be the biggest domino, especially in that division, which seems to be for grabs at this point. You pair T. Higgins with Tank Dell and Nico Collins, that offense immediately becomes a top 5 offense. The Colts, they get him. They also have Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. That offense immediately explodes. Those two places are my preferred destinations for T. Higgins, and I think he would be exceptional anywhere.
Yeah, and we could definitely, like, you'll have that gauntlet of wide receivers there, especially you could get back Alec Pierce probably if you make a deal with the Colts there. Plus, you're probably going to get like a second round pick. I don't know if you'll quite get a first back for him, but definitely a couple players.
Yeah, and they both have the cap space to lock him up long term and give him the deal that he deserves as well. So I think that's definitely the move to be made.
Yeah, but a lot of things happening in free agency right now. We'll still cover it as we get breaking news throughout the show, but now it's time to go over the offseason preview, what these teams need to do before we preview their schedule to really get over the hump, get to the Super Bowl, and if they're not going to make the playoffs, what do they need to do to tank this year? We starting in the NFC or the AFC here?
You decide.
Yeah, so let's start with the AFC North. We'll start with a team who doesn't really have that many issues in the Baltimore Ravens. Last year, the Ravens were by far the best team in the regular season, having impressive wins versus the Miami Dolphins, having impressive wins in San Francisco versus the 49ers. They're basically the anti-Cowboys and the anti-Dolphins, where they basically only won games against teams with a winning record, had one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, and came out on top, but had a very disappointing ending to the season, and they were at home and just went out with an absolute whimper. So
Yeah.
how do we fix that?
So right now they're one of only 8 teams who are still negative in the cap. They have negative 180,000, so nothing too severe. They can probably restructure a couple deals and free up some cash. I'll look at the free agents in a second. Some of the things that they can do is they can cut someone like a Marcus Williams. You'd save 12 million there. There's a couple other signings. Tyus Bowser, you could save about 5 million. Morgan Moses, 5.5 million. So that's a couple of ways you can be over the cap. Patrick Richard, you could save 4 million by cutting him. And then yeah, so that Lamar Jackson deal is paying him 32 million in the cap. And then a lot of these other guys, you're talking Marcus Humphrey, Ronnie Stanley. So overall, their cap situation is not great. I think what they could really use is a really solid wide receiver because Odell is most likely gone. I'll pull up the free agents here, but what do you think is their biggest hole to fix?
Yeah, I'd say their biggest hole to fix right now is your defense is strong at every single level, so it's really just focusing on offense. Zay Flowers is a really good wide receiver. You have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, but I think the Ravens just have this carousel of unknown running backs. And like, it's a retirement home at this point where you're like, oh, Danny Woodhead is there. Austin Eckler at the end of his career. They signed Melvin Gordon this year, was on the team at one point.
They got Dante Freeman there.
Dante Freeman was there at one point, and I believe they signed the guy who went from the Raiders, who's really good. Latavius Murray was there. So I think just having a really strong running back there, and then also getting another really good wide receiver to go along with Zay Flowers, I think that would be a big move. Just get a bigger physical receiver in the draft this year. Then you'll have Mark Andrews, but there's really not that many flaws. And then just replacing some of the guys they're going to have to cut. So probably getting someone in the secondary if you have to depart with a Marcus Williams or a Marlon Humphreys there just to sign the cap. But they're definitely good at drafting defenders, so not too worried about the Ravens this offseason. And then just keeping Lamar Jackson healthy is also going to be the key.
Yeah. So here are some of their free agents. Odell, he's all but gone. We have Gus Edwards, he could be gone. Nelson Aguilar, Patrick Queen is a free agent.
Oh no, not Nelson Aguilar.
Jadavian Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, J.K. Dobbins, Justin Matabuke, who they ended up franchise tagging. Devin Duvernay, Laquan Treadwell. So basically their entire receiver core is a free agent, it looks like. Delvin Cook, who signed for a league minimum. He'll go somewhere, maybe the XFL. Rock Yassin. We got Tyler Huntley, Geno Stone, Ronald Darby. And yeah, so mostly it's on the offensive side of the ball. Kevin Ziedler.
Yeah.
Will he stay? Will he go? But a lot of these guys, I just don't see them re-signing. Maybe Patrick Queen.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Kyle Van Noy, biggest freeloader in the NFL. I mean, he'll go to a team and be like, actually, I don't want to be here because we don't have a chance of making it to the Super Bowl. Can you cut me so I can go to a contender and then lose in the conference championship game, which seeming like Kyle Van Noy does every single year. It's frankly Van Noying at this point. And then you have Dalvin Cook out the door. So for me with the Ravens, let's get another really solid, reliable receiver in the draft. We already have one of the best tight end duos. And then let's get a running back. Let's not have the Dalvin Cooks of the world. I know everyone loves J.K. Dobbins, but let's get someone to go along with J.K. Dobbins there, and then it'll make Lamar Jackson's life a lot easier when he's not the best running back on the team, and it's not a shot at him being a running back. It's just he's the best player at running the football on the team right now currently, which should not be the case.
Yeah, no, they definitely need some nice running backs. Whether it's in the draft, they've seemed to draft fine receivers. Like you've got the Gus Edwards of the world, the J.K. Dobbins. I think they can find a formidable replacement for both of these guys and a guy who can stay healthy because none of them have stayed healthy to this point.
Right.
So I definitely think that all these guys that they could lose are definitely replaceable. I think they should still somehow find a way to get a wide receiver one because they lost Odell. They have Zay Flowers who can make that leap, but get in some more wide receiver help because most of these guys are probably gone.
Yeah. So most of them are gone, but really it's offense that we need to focus on. Don't really have a problem with John Harbaugh's defense here, so that's always good. And then making sure Justin Tucker is as happy as possible and wants to stay on that team there is also a priority there. But you have the best special teams. You're going to consistently have one of the best defenses. It's really just making Lamar Jackson's life easier to reduce his injury risk so he doesn't take it upon himself to run the football. So just another playmaker at receiver to get over the hump against the Kansas City Chiefs team that is really good at playing man-to-man defense. Also, the Bengals can as well. And then getting that running game that can really open up the pass game for them as well. And then you have the triple-threaded, three-headed monster there at each level on offense.
Yeah, I think they should still be competing for that division for years to come. I have a couple of free agent news if you want to hear it as we pivot into the next team.
Okay.
Darnell Savage is a Jaguar, 3-year deal.
Congrats, Darnell Savage.
Yes, formerly known as 21 Savage.
We said we needed another dog on the Jaguars, and we got a Savage instead. So
yeah, and then Jonah Jackson, who was the guard for the Lions, is now a Ram. So he is gone. The Lions did sign an offensive lineman earlier, so that is just fine. Yeah, so that's the biggest news so far.
Yeah, Jonah Jackson, congrats to you, you absolute traitor, betraying Jared Goff and going to the Rams. No, I don't like it. You absolute traitor. How could you do that to the Lions? Come on.
Wrong. Now, our next team, I have the Browns up in front of me. We can go over them. I am a Browns enthusiast, as you can see with my Myles Garrett jersey. I have played their franchise before in Madden, and I know that Madden is the most accurate, most up-to-date, and obviously least buggy NFL game because there's none other. The Browns see themselves with $5 million in cap space. If they were to cut Deshaun Watson before June 1st, they would have a $136 million cap loss. And if they do it after, just 155. Cool 155 dead cap. But yeah, so their contract situations, you have Amari Cooper. You could cut him and save $20 million. You could cut Nick Chubb if you're heartless and save $12 million. Not a lot of cap room, but they still have a very top-heavy team. We're talking about Deshaun Watson's $64 million dead cap, and then Amari, Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, all these guys right around the $20 million range. What do you think the Browns need to do this offseason?
Yeah, the Browns are like kind of a mystery because you have Kevin Stefanski, who has now won 2 Coach of the Years under the Cleveland Browns, and he did something so remarkable last year. But really, what it comes down to is Deshaun Watson getting up to speed for the Cleveland Browns. So if Deshaun Watson isn't going to be healthy, isn't going to be in rhythm, nothing else really matters at all for the Cleveland Browns because you committed so much money to this guy, and it's tough to come back, especially after missing that much time. He had all of the controversy surrounding him, whether you think he's guilty or not. That plays a weight on you mentally, and now he has a shoulder injury, and it looks like he could just have perpetually tic-tac or nagging injuries there, and then you have the defense there already with Jim Schwartz, but unless he's going to be healthy on offense, we know Kevin Stefanski can coach around it and at least get you to the playoffs. But if Deshaun isn't healthy, it doesn't matter. So really, you just got to keep him healthy, save as much cap as possible without being heartless and cutting Nick Chubb. But I think you also could use some secondary health with how badly you got roasted by the Texans without Tank Dell, just by Nico Collins there, and they absolutely cooked you. So I think maybe another corner to go along, get a little bit younger in the secondary to go along with Denzel Ward there. But overall, if Deshaun isn't there, he's not healthy, then you have all of this dead cap. Why did we trade for him? I kind of get the gamble there, but at the same time, Texans took CJ Stroud, and they're looking like they kind of fleeced you in that deal at this point.
Oh, yeah, they definitely did. Some of their notable free agents that they'll have to figure out whether they want to re-sign, if they want to restructure some deals or cut some players. Zadarius Smith, who was very formidable for them last year. If they want to go younger, maybe they consider drafting his replacement. They just traded for Jerry Jeudy for a 5th and 6th round pick to fortify that wide receiver room, which has Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper. Shelby Harris, he's another old star. Do they want to sign him or not? Joe Flacco, Flackenheimer, comeback player of the year. Do they want to bring him back? Does he want to come back? Harrison Bryant, tight end for him. And then other than that, a lot of these players are replaceable. Kareem Hunt, will he come back? He played a little bit for them when Nick Chubb went down. But other than that, everyone else is just roster spots for him.
So I have a question for you about the Joe Flacco situation, because I think everyone agrees that you need a really good backup when you have someone who's had the injury issues of someone like Deshaun Watson. However, if you do re-sign Joe Flacco, fans saw what what he did last season, and just how incredible that run was, and I'm sure Joe Flacco gave those fans a feeling that they really had never felt being a Browns fan in history, especially in the modern era. So how much do you have to think about in your back of the mind, in the back of your mind, where if Deshaun Watson goes out there, plays badly, you're paying him all this money, and then the fans are just like, Flacco, Flacco, Flacco. So it's
Yeah.
like, you need to sign him, but also your fans could also turn on you if you don't play him and Deshaun Watson plays poorly. So if you're the Browns management, does that factor in? Does that like factor into your thought process at all in bringing him back?
Yeah, I think it should absolutely. I also think that what happened last year is also something that doesn't typically happen. Way he played, how great he played better than he had pretty much his entire career in those 6 weeks of NFL. I mean, he was on pace for 55 touchdowns and 30 picks. He was playing out of his mind. And you kind of saw like the Geno Magic the year before and how it played off the second year. I don't think he would match that same level of skill that he played last year. So I think you'd be down for disappointment. I mean, if you're going to sign him for like a $2 million deal, $3 or $4 million deal, I don't think it's going to break the bank. But what you're talking about, like if Deshaun Watson sucks and he gets hurt again, Joe Flacco steps in again, like I see that there's going to be some issues there.
Yeah, it's like the Carson Wentz stuff. Like,
Yeah.
but I feel like someone like Carson Wentz too, who not a lot of people want to see Carson Wentz play, would be another good backup there. So I think that'll be an interesting kind of point for the Browns to talk about this season. And as we transition into another team, I think we have some breaking news.
Yeah, we just got some breaking news. The Green Bay Packers signed to a 3-year deal one of the pivotal free agents, none other than Josh Jacobs.
What?
Yup.
And Aaron Jones is still there?
Yup.
So they're replacing, basically, you're going to have Aaron Jones. Is Aaron Jones a free agent or?
I don't
No.
believe so. We're going to see later on in the show if he is.
Josh Jacobs. Wow. On the Green Bay Packers?
I actually really like that, to be honest. That's actually massive.
Wow. They're going to be simulating a lot of farms up there in Green Bay, but we'll get to that when we go over the Green Bay Packers preview. But what a bombshell.
That's massive. I actually like that a lot.
That is awesome, especially for Jordan Love. I mean, the Cowboys can't defend the run. If you rematch with the Cowboys again, you're going to have Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs going crazy, especially if you can get the Josh Jacobs of old with Aaron Jones, and then you can kind of fade Aaron Jones back into like the 2. Like, what?
Yeah, that's nuts. No, that was a bombshell.
Jesus Christ.
I'm just seeing these replies come in slowly but surely. So we're going to see more bombshells as this episode progresses.
Wow.
But we go from the highs and now we go to the lows, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do they have for the free agency? Let's see. They have $27 million in cap space. We went over recently how they just signed Russell the Muscle Wilson. Who are some of the notable guys on this team with notable caps? Well, TJ Watt, he's making 30 mil. Cam Hayward, he's making 22 mil. If they were to restructure his deal, they couldn't. And then we have Deontay Johnson. They're listening to trade offers for him. Alex Highsmith's making 13 million, but overall, pretty good cap situation. I'll look at their free agents, but what do you think is the most important thing for them moving into the season?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for them moving into the season will definitely be fixing that offensive line, because they didn't have a great offensive line last year. They tried to address it in the draft, and it started to come together towards the end of the season. But we need that offensive line to be together before, I don't know, week 14. I think that would be helpful. And then just getting Najee Harris going before the end of the season would be good, because every single year he teases fantasy owners because the last 6 weeks he'll be one of the best running backs in the league, but after that and before that he'll be one of the most mediocre running backs. And then also learning how to get George Pickens the ball. Why is this such a hard concept? Every time he touches the ball, he goes for 4 catches and 130 yards. Like, the guy has a right to throw a fit on the sideline, because get me the ball, because every time I do, I spin hay into gold here. So getting George Pickens the ball, and then also your secondary outside of outside of Joey Porter Jr., I think it's time we move on from Joe Hayden. Let's get some youth in that secondary. It's always kind of been the Steelers' weakness there. And then can Mike Tomlin turn one of his non-losing seasons into a actual, I don't know, playoff win? Can we get a playoff winning season and a non-losing playoff season? At least go one playoff win if you're going to make the playoffs this year, instead of disappointing everyone with putting out one of the worst products in the league every time you've made the playoffs for the past 2 years by getting blown out by the Bills, getting blown out by the Browns, getting blown out by the Jacksonville Jaguars with Blake Bortles. Like, come on. Let's do better, Pittsburgh.
And losing to Tim Tebow as well.
Ugh.
It's just been a lot of lumps the last several years. They haven't quite lived up to what their roster was capable of, especially when they had Le'Veon and AB. That was an opportunity for them to surpass, but they did not. Looking at their free agents, they don't really have a lot of free agents who I think are worth noting. They are going to lose their right tackle. He's already gone. He went to the Patriots. That is Chukwuma Okorafor. He's gone. They did lose the great Mitch Trubisky, friend of the show.
To the Bills.
He is now back with the Bills. That is unfortunate. Allen Robinson and Patrick Peterson are now gone. They were cut. Levi Wallace, will they bring him back? Keanu Neal, will he come back? Quan Alexander. And then that's really it. Miles Boykin, that's a big loss. Where will he go? Presley Harvin, the punter. We all know how hard punters can be to replace.
Yeah.
But those are the big ones. Quan Alexander, he's the most probably noteworthy. Keanu Neal, maybe he'll go to the retirement home. Anybody here, Levi Wallace, and like anybody else who's noteworthy for them? Mason Cole is also a free agent. He's 28.
Who?
Exactly. So I don't think they're really losing anybody notable in free agency. Wide receiver, they can probably sign anybody. Nelson Aguilar seems like someone who could replace Allen Robinson just fine. So yeah, nothing really noteworthy for them as far as free agent wise. They just need to get George Pickens the ball. Maybe Russ can do that for him. They need to get an offensive line. And then other than that, their defense is always pretty solid.
Yeah.
And their weapons are good.
Yeah, I think you need to actually sit back, have a long meeting, and actually try and replace your quarterback this year and see if you can trade up and get JJ McCarthy in the draft. I feel like that would be a good person for you to target, because I feel like outside of the top 3 guys that we have here with Jaden Daniels, and then we also have Drake May and Caleb Williams, I think JJ McCarthy could be one of the better players in the draft. Definitely better than Bo Nix, because Bo Nix has never won a big game in his life. That's why he switched colleges, because he kept getting blown out in big games. So I think going for someone like a JJ McCarthy, you can sit him behind Russell Wilson. Once Russell Wilson is painfully mediocre and average and terrible to watch, then you can be like, okay, now we have an injection of youth that's not someone like Kenny Pickett, who plays like a 38-year-old who has sciatica.
Yeah, I don't think that Kenny Pickett's not the answer. In fact, you should consider trading him potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe give him one more year, see what he has, but he has not panned out. He has 13 touchdowns in 2 years. That's pathetic. And I know he's been hurt, but really just has not lived up to expectations. That's one of the worst quarterback drafts in NFL history at this point for how bad all these guys have been.
Yeah, he was the only quarterback taken in the first round that year. What does that say?
And the only other people who are noteworthy is Desmond Ridder, who's got benched, and Sam Howell, who got benched. So that draft has been an absolute nightmare for them. Last team to go over in the AFC North is the Cincinnati Bengals, and they are actually in the best position of all of these teams. Joe Burrow, obviously we saw him go down last year, but their cap situation is fantastic. They have $49 million in cap, plus you can add another $20 million when they trade T. Higgins. So we're looking right around $60 to $70 million. We don't know for sure what will happen with Joe Mixon. If they were to trade him, that being Joe Mixon, they'd save another $6 million. So the bankroll is open in Cincinnati. Now, their offensive line has been the issue pretty much the entire Joe Burrow era.
Yeah.
But they'll need to find a replacement for T. Higgins, who asked for a trade, and getting an offensive line, and then replacing some of the players on defense who they've lost over the last couple of years, that being Jesse Bates and some notable other figures as well.
Yeah. I mean, the Bengals are in the best position because they're have to replace the position that they are the best at drafting. They're not great at offensive line, pretty decent at running back, very excellent on the defensive side of the ball, and then they are absolutely electric at drafting wide receivers. And then every elite wide receiver in the draft will be begging to play with Joe Burrow because he's just that cold to play with. So I think replacing T. Higgins, you'll definitely be able to do that in the draft, but open up your bankroll in free agency. See if you can get some help in your secondary there. I think that's where you need to bolster up the most, because as far as your defensive line, you still have Logan Wilson there, who's an absolute monster. You still have guys like DJ Reader, who's an absolute monster there. And then you still have one of the best pass rushers in the league on defense. So I think you can address that in the draft and then get some secondary help. And then I think if you have that much money, can we give a call to Derrick Henry? Because how sick would Derrick Henry look in a Bengals uniform? I know people don't typically think about Cincinnati when they think of retirement. They think of somewhere like probably Texas, no state income tax, maybe going to Florida and Tampa Bay, or go to somewhere warm like LA. But if you want a chance at that ring, Derrick, they have the capital to do it. You would be the second running back on that team, but you'd still have games where you're the number one guy. You can go somewhere and make a difference. I think Derrick Henry would be an absolutely electric signing. And I think also maybe target someone like a Dalton Schultz in free agency and bolster up that tight end position. But this is a team that really doesn't have any holes on it. It's really just, can we wake the fuck up in September?
Yeah, seriously.
That's it. And then keep Joe Burrow healthy.
Let's stop going 1-3 to start the season, because you still go on a tear. You still finish as a top team. Even when they lost Joe Burrow, they were still in the mix at the end of it.
Yeah.
But that's all they got to do. Notable free agents for them: Jonah Williams, who's all but gone, right tackle for him. Chidubio Awuzie, he's available in free agency. Will they re-sign him? Tyler Boyd, he's entering age 30. Will they re-sign him? DJ Reader, will he stay? Will he go? Some other notable players: AJ McCarron, who was now playing in the XFL. Will he stay or will he go?
They still have him.
They do. And they also re-signed Drew Sample for a very small deal. Irv Smith, where will he go? A lot of these guys they've already re-signed, but that is the notable notes here for free agents. So all these guys are replaceable. I think they should draft at least Tyler Boyd's replacement. That should be easy enough.
Yeah.
You saw them. Jamar Chase was a first-round pick. T. Higgins was a second-round pick. So I think Tyler Boyd was towards the end of the draft. So you guys can pretty much hit on any of these guys. If you can hit on your number 2 receiver and then maybe go after somebody in free agency for the wide receiver position, I think you'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely be fine there. I think you draft like a couple receivers. You're not very good at drafting offensive linemen, so just fix that in the draft. Or if you keep spending on offensive linemen and you can't have a good offensive line consistently, maybe coaching is the problem and you need a new offensive line coordinator there. Because I mean, how many years are you going to just spend money on the offensive line, spend the most money on the offensive line, and then consistently have one of the worst offensive lines? And it's not a problem of Joe Burrow holding onto the ball too long, because when Joe Burrow wants to, he gets rid of the ball faster than anybody in the league. So it's not a Joey B problem. And then, so I think, getting running back in the draft there, fixing the offensive line. Then you got to draft a couple of replacements there, but drafting people like Battle in the draft last year, you saw how they were able to replace Jesse Bates there. Their defense was still electric last season, so I really don't think defense is going to be an issue for them. Not too many holes. It's just, can we keep Joe Burrow healthy? And what will we get back for T. Higgins and then replacing him after that?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. If they do go after Derrick Henry, maybe they consider trading Joe Mixon as well. And there will definitely be suitors for him, as now we have Josh Jacobs off the board. So maybe a Saquon is in the mix here. But speaking of Saquon, we saw how he recently just signed with the Packers, which is massive.
Saquon did?
Oh, Josh Jacobs did, yeah. So now we have the Packers. We can go over them as we pivot to the NFC North. Obviously, we have the Lions, who were the division winner last year. They should still be up there in the mix. The Packers breathing down their neck. And then the other two teams, kind of a wild card. What will the Bears do with that first overall pick and their cap space? And then the Vikings, who seem to be going nowhere slowly.
Yeah.
So I have the Packers up here. We'll go over them real quick. With the addition of Josh Jacobs, talk about that signing as well. But then also their cap situation. They have $34 million in cap space. but that does not include what could be an additional $12 million if they were to trade Aaron Jones and have Josh Jacobs replace him. Jordan Love's only getting paid a measly $12 million cap hit. And then we got Kenny Clark as the big high roller making $27 million. Jair Alexander making $24 million, although if they cut him, they'll save 15. And then really to round out their big cons, they have Preston Smith making 14, Devondre Campbell making 14, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the Packers are probably in one of the best positions in the league as far as this year. I'm pretty sure they were thinking about cutting Jair Alexander, but now that you have Josh Jacobs on the team, you have one of the best stables of running backs, even if you trade Aaron Jones, because you'll still have AJ Dillon. Yes, the farm simulator himself will be there simulating farms, tearing up people on the football field, being an absolute physical running back and running people over. And then their offense is pretty good. Maybe you just draft someone to replace David Bakhtiari there, but he's been injured over the past few years, but you still have one of the best offensive lines in the league. You have all these wide receivers that come out of nowhere. They're like, Romeo, wherefore art thou Dobbs? Oh, Romeo is a dog. And then you have all of these wide receivers that people were seeing on display versus the Dallas Cowboys. So I think at receiver, don't really need that much help there, and I think I'm comfortable with their offense. And then you draft Luke Musgrave at tight end, and then I forget the second tight end that they have on the team. Tucker Kraft, who is a candidate to be the next Cole Kmet in the NFL here. So your offense is pretty solid already. So now you can open up that bankroll. You pretty much only spend money on defense anyway. So I think the Packers really just build up that defense so it's an elite defense, and then you were able to give the Lions problems last year. At this point, it's probably your division to lose, and it's going to be one of the most underratedly competitive divisions in the league as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, so we look at the free agents. They just cut David Bakhtiari earlier today, and then they went out inside Josh Jacobs. Preston Smith they did re-sign. Other than that, Darnell Savage has left. He is now a Jaguar. AJ Dillon was a free agent. He most likely will not return. So really, they're going to be pairing Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs together in the backfield, which is elite.
No farm simulator anymore.
No farm simulator. I'm sure he's going to go somewhere on the farm, probably stay in the Midwest if
Houston,
I were to guess.
Probably.
Yes, Houston, we have a problem. And then also we have Jonathan Owens, a.k.a. We have Simone Biles' boyfriend. Will he be signed? Or should I say Jonathan Owens' girlfriend, Simone Biles, according to him. Other than that, that's about it. They don't really have any free agents to worry about. None of them making all that much money anyways. So they can still go out there. Maybe it is a wide receiver. Maybe it's getting somebody as an edge rusher on that team on defense. But they got a bunch of draft picks. They got a bunch of draft capital. And they look like they're going up and up.
Yeah, they look like they're about to charge up and be one of the best teams in the NFC next year. Matt LaFleur proved that he could be one of the best coaches in the league. We weren't sure if it was LaFleur or Aaron Rodgers, and this is one of the best teams, at least scheme-wise, in the NFL at this point. So excited to see what Jordan Love does in year 2, and then they're probably going to be in a bidding war with the Lions to get Khalil Mack, because both those teams have a lot of cap space there. So I could see the Packers and the Lions aggressively bidding against each other on some of these premier free agents on defense.
Yeah, especially because they both have similar things that they want to address in there as well. So I think that they're definitely in that spot here. Next team, should we go Lions, Bears, or Vikings?
Yeah, let's talk about the Vikings here, because with Kevin O'Connell, what was necessarily the goal when they hired him to be the head coach? Was it, hey, we need to replace Mike Zimmer here and then build up this offense with Kirk Cousins and start winning the division and competing? Because you won the division the first year, and then you go out there and you lose to the insufferable, absolute abomination that was the New York Giants making the playoffs that year with Daniel Jones, and then Kirk Cousins lost in a game to Daniel Jones. So that was embarrassing. And now you've gotten worse and worse and worse each year that Kevin O'Connell has been there. And it seems like they're kind of in a transition period. And typically when you hire a new coach, it's like, okay, now we transition. But now it's like, okay, we don't want Kirk Cousins here. We have to make Justin Jefferson the highest paid player in NFL history at the wide receiver position. So they got a lot of problems to address there, especially because Kirk Cousins is testing free agency, but it's not like your draft pick is that high where you can get an elite quarterback. So I think this is probably the year where they're like, take a step back, like maybe we should tank.
Well, it's funny you say that because there is breaking news out of the Kirk Cousins camp. Sources, according to the Brickyard, Kirk Cousins has signed a 4-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, what? No way.
Yep.
He actually did it?
He went to the Falcons.
Good for Kirk Cousins. Wait, how much money did they give him for 4 years?
We don't know yet. The reports are still out there, but he is an Atlanta Falcon now.
That's a longer deal than the Vikings have ever given him, because he would usually do those like 1+1 years, or he'd do like a 2-3 year contract with all the guaranteed money. But Kirk Cousins may have just finessed the Atlanta Falcons there, because not only do you have a guy coming off a Achilles injury, which is for a 30-year-old, that's not an easy injury to come back from. I know Aaron Rodgers wants to make it seem like it's the easiest thing in the world. Not a big deal, but for a quarterback that old, that is a big deal, especially with Kirk Cousins. And now Kirk Cousins is going to be on the Atlanta Falcons, and maybe he'll actually get Kyle Pitts the ball. He has Drake London now. He has Bijan Robinson, Raheem Morris on that team. So now that's a legitimate contender there. You have Baker Mayfield locked up now. So pretty much all the quarterbacks in free agency are locked up. But
yeah,
he actually did it. I didn't think he would leave.
Yeah, he's gone. And just in time for us to go over the Vikings. I'm trying to get the exact numbers here with my sources. We should get that by the end of this segment here. But other players to consider in free agency for them as well. Brian O'Neill could be gone for them as well. That's a $22 million cap hit. Do they re-sign Justin Jefferson? And better yet, does Justin Jefferson re-sign with them? Because now that Kirk Cousins is gone, that opens the door for maybe I don't want to be in Minnesota, because he can go anywhere and be a star no matter what.
Yeah.
They did lock up TJ Hawkinson earlier this year, but for the most part, like, this is a team that was kind of average. They lose Kirk Cousins, and now they will be the worst team in that division, most likely, unless if the Bears really impress me. But they should definitely be the cellar dwellers. They have $36 million in cap space, but they just lost their franchise quarterback. Justin Jefferson could be on the move potentially. I think this Vikings team should finish last, and that's if every other team pulls their weight.
Yeah, I think the Vikings will definitely finish last unless you get a phenom that no one saw coming in the draft at quarterback this year. But like, now it's the question too, like, Justin Jefferson, does he want to be there, or does he just care about getting paid the most money possible? Because the Vikings could definitely do that at this point, because like, okay, well, if we're not paying a quarterback, we might as well give Justin Jefferson the bag. So when we are able to draft a young quarterback, we already have our star wide receiver there. So it's really going to be what Justin Jefferson's goals are, and that's just something he's going to have to reevaluate with himself. But the Vikings could always tag him still.
Yeah, they could. So Kirk Cousins left. Daniil Hunter is also a free agent. He's not coming back. Marcus Davenport won't come back. They did cut Alexander Mattson. He'll find a home probably on the Sea Dragons in the XFL. Jordan Hicks is a free agent.
The Ravens.
The bald-headed assassin, where will he go? Cam Akers, friend of the show, where will he go? A lot of questions there.
Yeah.
Brandon Powell. They did sign Jonathan Greenyard from the Texans onto that team, so that defense should be a little bit better. But other than that, I think the Vikings should be the worst team in this division. I have them going last, and so do you.
Yeah, I have them going last for sure. It's a full rebuild, so not really too much to cover. What can you really do? You can suck, get as many high draft picks as possible, and then trade away someone like a TJ Hawkinson. You just locked him up, but he could be really appealing to a team that has cap space, like the Cincinnati Bengals. That would be a great fit for him there. Then you have Justin Jefferson. Well, you could sign and trade him for a boatload of picks there, but Kirk Cousins officially gone out of the building there, so it's time to fully rebuild, and then we'll see how committed they are to Kevin O'Connell after this year, or does Kevin O'Connell really want to participate in this rebuild? We'll see what the robot Remy Malek is thinking.
Yeah. The only team I think that has the chance to finish below them would be the next team, which is the Chicago Bears, because they are the Chicago Bears, and we should not give them credit, because we know we had expectations for them last year and they did not live up to expectations. However, They have $63 million in cap space. They're most likely moving on from Justin Fields and drafting Caleb Williams, who many to see to be the next Trevor Lawrence. Will he pan out to be Trevor Lawrence? Remains to be seen. However, they re-signed Montez Sweat, who they acquired on the trade deadline. Tremaine Edmonds is on that team. DJ Moore, the luxury, Cole Kmet, is on that team as well. Everyone's pretty much paid except for their quarterback situation. Justin Fields will most likely be traded, but for the Bears, they have the talent on offense. They did just sign DeAndre Swift earlier today. I'll look at their free agents here, but really for them, bolstering that defense, which has been their priority this last year, and then also just being competitive again, because they have not been competitive to this point.
Yeah, they haven't been competitive to this point, and the biggest thing that the Bears need to do to fix their organization and really turn fate around, I don't know, put an actual bear on your helmet for your logo. How are you the Chicago Bears? First of all, where are the Bears in Illinois? Please show me, because I haven't seen any Bears in Chicago here. So that's the first thing. And then your logo on your helmet is absolutely embarrassing. How do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fit an entire flag with a skull and crossbones on the helmet, but you can't fit a bear on your helmet? You can't even have a bear paw? But it's no, let's do a dumb C and make it orange. Like, your colors don't even match. What blue bears have you seen walking around in the wild in Chicago? Unless they've been rolling around a patch of blueberries. So first of all, you are wasting the branding of the Chicago Bears because your logo sucks. So change that, and then maybe you'll actually have a quarterback throw for more than Jordan Love did last year, who everyone said was going to be a bust for the Green Bay Packers. And then once you change your logo and your colors, you can draft Caleb Williams and then spend a bunch of money on offense. You have the cap space to go out there and get a T. Higgins to go along with Caleb Williams. And now you have Khalil Herbert. You have Cole Kmet, who is a person who was a Bear probably in a past life. He's a luxury at tight end. He is 6'6". He's one of the most underrated and best tight ends in the NFL. You have DJ Moore there, but you need another playmaker at wide receiver. Probably need another running back. And then once you draft Caleb Williams, let's make sure you don't mess this up there, and then you give him the weapons around him to actually succeed and perform there. But overall, last year, I was really impressed with how they finished. Defensively, I thought they came on really strong at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think their defense gave me a lot of excitement, especially when you saw Montez Sweat come onto the mix. They started to have a lot more pressure. Their secondary looked a lot nicer as well. I know they cut Eddie Jackson earlier this offseason, but I think their defense, if they can draft the right players, they're going to have their rookie quarterbacks. So they restart there. They have an opportunity to still, with that 9th pick, get another wide receiver. So you could see a Caleb Williams, Malik Neighbors, and then the rest of the draft you can focus on defensive players and building up that offensive line. They did take away the center for the Bills, Ryan Bates. He is now on the Bears as well. Other than that, the free agency, you're seeing like Devontae Foreman, replaceable. Mercedes Lewis, somehow still plays, I guess, 40 years old, but he's still there.
Is he actually 40?
He is actually 40 years old. He's
Good
as
for
old.
him.
He is as old as Aaron Rodgers. And then we also have Bob Tonyan. He'll find a home somewhere. Yannick Ngakoue, he'll be gone. While we were looking through the Bears free agency, though, I have another blockbuster. I don't know if we should wait.
Yeah, wait till after we're done with the Bears, and then we can do it.
Yes. So, yeah, other than that, like, their replacements should be getting a pass rush that's competitive. Montez Sweat was great for them. Resetting the clock, getting as much talent as you can around eventually Caleb Williams, I assume, getting some capital back for Justin Fields. But the Bears are in a great position. They should, at worst, be the third best team in that division ahead of the Vikings.
So if you're the Bears, though, do you use some of that cap space and trade for T. Higgins, who we know is a known, legitimate number one commodity, who will be an absolute game changer, especially going on with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, who is the biggest luxury in the NFL, and then draft an absolute freak at number 9 on defense? Or do you save your money on a wide receiver and then just draft one who you may not? I don't know. Chicago's not like the best wide receiver team, or not the best team at drafting wide receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you think about who they've drafted in the past, you're looking at the Darnell Mooney's of the world. And other than that, like all their talented wide receivers you've seen in the past, the Brandon Marshalls of the world, I'm trying to remember who they had in that Bears run in 2018. Alshon Jeffries. Like other than that, like they haven't really been all that successful. DJ Moore stepped in and was great
Yeah.
for them. So yeah, going after T Higgins, I think is the right move for them.
Yeah, I think definitely going after T. Higgins, and then you can draft an absolute monster on defense or at running back to go along with Caleb Williams. But I think the Bears do have a lot of potential. It's like, can we actually fix the core problem with the organization, which is just misusing having the licensing of being the Chicago Bears?
Yes, they need to fix their shit. But breaking news as we're going over all things free agency, the Giants' Saquon Barkley will be moving on and staying in division, going to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Whoa, dude.
Massive signing for them.
Jesus Christ.
I like this a lot. They move on from D Swift and get much better at running back. Saquon Barkley, say what you will about him over the last few years, injury concerns. He is still one of the best running backs in football, and behind that offensive line will be electric for them.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy though, because now you have AJ Brown, who's an absolute game changer. I don't think AJ Brown has asked for a trade yet. I know he had like a weird riff with them at the end of the year last year, but yeah, with Saquon Barkley, Devontae Smith now, Dallas Goedert, and then Jalen Hurts, this is either going to be one of the best Philadelphia Eagles teams of all time, or it's going to be one of the most disappointing offenses in NFL history if they're not able to put it together here. But I love that he stayed in division. It's a giant FU to the Giants because he probably doesn't even need to buy a new house because he's pretty much right there with Philadelphia because the Giants play in New Jersey. So really the drive to Philly is not that far. Stays in a similar area, can kind of have the same business connections that he was working on before. So I like the fit with Saquon Barkley going to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's great when you go to a division rival there. Disappointing the Texans didn't get him, but that's still a big move for Philadelphia. Let's see what this turns into for the Eagles because this could be an absolutely magical offense, and hopefully it fixes the issues from last year, which was they didn't have a run game.
Yeah, no, they didn't have a run game at all. At least not a consistent run game. You saw D Swift for a couple games, but other than that,
It was like Boston Scott.
Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, we can finally move on from that era. But now we go into the America's team, the most exciting team last year, a team that we were early on, one of our early victories of the Brickyard podcast. If you're a fan of the show, you know how deep our Lions lore goes, all the way back until the beginning of the podcast. We go over them because they made it to the NFC title game, and they even showed up for the first half of that game. Very impressive. Now, if only they could piece together 60 minutes next time. They have $45 million in cap space. We'll go over their free agents, but their notable cap hits will be Jared Goff on his final year of his deal, Taylor Decker also on the final year of his deal, Frank Ragnow, Cam Sutton, those guys $32, $19, and $12 million respectively. Aiden Hutchinson, he's approaching his deal. Penei Sewell approaching his deal, and then eventually paying Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's coming up on his contract as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of big free agents coming up. So I feel like this year they may not be as active as some people think because I do think they'll probably need to roll some of that cap over to next year, especially you're probably focusing on getting an extension done with Jared Goff at some point in the offseason. You damn better make sure you extend Aiden Hutchinson and Penei Sewell, and then definitely want to keep Amon-Ra St. Brown on that team. So that's 4 major deals on that team. Jared Goff probably isn't going to demand top tier money, even though there's probably a lot of teams that would love to have him, but he reinvented himself in Detroit, making sure you re-sign those guys. But I think specifically for them, what they need to do is get someone like Tyrann Mathieu or Marlon Humphreys. If one of those Ravens corners gets cut there and Tyrann Mathieu gets cut by the Saints. So I think that would help your secondary a lot. You need to focus on the secondary in the draft this year, and then please do everything you can to go out there and get Khalil Mack. Now that Christian Wilkins is off the board, I think Khalil Mack would be that extra pass rusher to go along with Aiden Hutchinson to really create some pressure. He had a career year last year, and we'll see if the Chargers want to move on from him. But I think if you go out there, get an elite pass rusher like Khalil Mack, draft someone who can go along with Aiden Hutchinson, that's really going to help you, especially when you get fatigued and you're up massively against the San Francisco 49ers, and someone like Brock Purdy or Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, whoever it is, has to keep dropping back. And you also want that pass rush for the Lions to be relentless because they've shown that they can get a lead, but there's also shown that they can absolutely blow a lead there. But I think they'll be different this year just because Jahmyr Gibbs came on at the end of last year. I think he'll be even better this year. And then we'll finally have, hopefully, a full year of Jamison Williams.
Yeah, and hopefully we can start to see it piece together. I think that although it was unfortunate what we saw the second half of the NFC title game this year, I do also think that it's a opportunity for them to learn and to overcome that next year. Next year, when they get in that situation, they will not be as laid back as they were. Looking real quick at some of their free agents, we know that they lost Jonah Jackson earlier. He went to the Rams. But other than that, we got Tracy Walker, who they'll probably let walk. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he looks like he could be coming back potentially. Emmanuel Mosley, they did re-sign. And then we got Charles Harris, who they'll let go. Josh Reynolds, where will he go? Who had some notable drops in that NFC title game. Teddy Bridgewater retiring. And then, yeah, other than that, we got like the Nate Sutfields of the world, the Romeo Aquaras, Will Harris, Graham Glasnow. So not overly insane. Craig Reynolds coming back as well, but everybody else definitely replaceable. They did re-sign Brock Wright to shore everything up there.
Yeah, I think the Lions are in a really great position. It's just, how is that loss going to affect them? I know with someone like Dan Campbell, that's going to haunt him every single night and then have an effect on the team where we're going to keep working harder and harder. And I think it's going to fuel one of the biggest comebacks. And I think the Lions, while they were really good last year, they weren't as dominant as they had the potential to be. And I think next year and next year's draft, where this is a team that hits on the first round, the second round, the third round, the fifth round, and the sixth round, drafting players like Malcolm Rodriguez, who had an interception against Brock Purdy in that conference championship game, who is a Cowboy from Oklahoma, and he just likes to go out there and hit people. I mean, like, come on. They're one of the best teams at drafting in the league, and that's only going to strengthen them this year, especially when they're looking at, okay, every single thing that went wrong in that game, what do we need to do to fix it on defense? And then how do we add some more leadership in the locker room so that doesn't happen again? I am excited to see what the Detroit Lions do. I know the Green Bay Packers are coming, but they still don't have MCDC. They still don't have Malcolm Rodriguez. They still don't have that same dog and fire that the Detroit Lions have. No, they're going to face each other twice, but it's going to be very competitive in the NFC North next year. I'm excited to watch it, and I do think the Lions are going to be even better than they were last year. I picked them to go 14-3. They almost got there. They were 12-5. Well, actually, they were 13-5 if you don't count that rigged game versus the Dallas Cowboys. But I think they'll hit 14-3 next year. Everyone's going to be coming from them, but I think that'll help them motivate. You'll probably see them rattle off 7 in a row to start the season.
Yeah, I think so too. So we're in a great spot here. While we were talking, this isn't a very massive signing, but it's the one that I expect to see a strong reaction from. The Patriots sign Antonio Gibson.
Why?
Because it's the Patriots.
What is wrong with the New England Patriots? I mean, can we get, like, the Patriots are literally like the Thanos of acquiring mediocre, useless running backs in the NFL. What is next? Calvin Ridley? Are you going to go out there and sign? Like, I'm surprised they didn't even sign D Swift here. Are we going to go out there and get Dalvin Cook as well? Are we going to get Latavius Murray next? Are we going to go after Austin Eckler in 5 years? Like, what are we doing for the New England Patriots? Like, Antonio Gibson, you're fine. Is he better than Ramondre Stevenson? Absolutely not. At least they won't draft. Oh, yeah, actually, they will still draft a really mediocre running back in the third or second round this year. I don't understand this team. Like, Antonio Gibson, okay, that's fine. He's not changing your world. Do you need him? No, you could draft someone better than him. Why are we paying him to just kind of be okay when we already have Ramondre Stevenson?
This is such a Patriots move.
Yeah.
Like, this is a team that needs wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, offensive linemen, defensive play. Like, they need everything. Yeah. And their first move is to go out and sign Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, and my reaction wouldn't be so strong if their fans weren't so stupid. I mean, Honestly, they'll be like, oh, we signed Antonio Gibson. We might have the best running back duo in the league. I'm like, what crack are they putting in your Dunkin' Donuts coffee that you are excited? First of all, you're excited about Mac Jones last year. You didn't believe us when they told you he would be a bust. He would be off the team and benched in the middle of the season, which we said he would be. And then
Really
you're like,
sucks.
oh, yeah, we have Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson right now. Like, I don't know what is in that Dunkin' Donuts coffee, but I want some of it because the delusion, the absolute euphoria, and I don't know, false hope it creates for Patriots fans is absolutely ridiculous.
What I find so funny about Mac Jones, especially, is we talk about that draft all the time and how cursed it is. And I have the draft up here as well. Go through it quickly. Like that quarterback class with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. That draft is going down as one of the worst drafts for quarterbacks in NFL history.
Yeah.
So before we get into the NBA and we talk about that team as at large, I have this draft up in front of us. I'll go over the top 10 picks. I'll go through each of them. And you can tell me whether they are busts, to be determined, or just flat out studs.
Okay.
So first overall was Trevor Lawrence.
TBD, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, with Trevor Lawrence, he was the best player in high school. He was the best player in college, and he was supposed to come into the NFL. He's the prince who's promised, and he had one of the most disappointing rookie years. He had the whole Urban Meyer situation. However, he did ruin the Indianapolis Colts season with Carson Wentz at the end of it, and then he had a nice, solid year, destroyed any faith in Justin Herbert in one playoff comeback, had the worst first half and the best second half he could possibly have. And that's kind of been the story with Trevor Lawrence. It's like, okay, wow, sometimes. And then other times you're like, you tripped over yourself and fumbled the ball when no one was around you. That's some Daniel Jones type of stuff going on right there. So it's like, sometimes he looks like Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes he looks like Daniel Jones. Can we at least get away from the Daniel Jones and at least be slightly better than Justin Herbert? That's all I ask.
Yeah, right now he's got 58 touchdowns, 39 picks on his career. So touchdown interception ratio, not quite to 2 yet. Number 2, Zach Wilson. I mean, bust, right?
Bust.
Massive bust.
Yeah, they literally asked, like, there are some executives, they're like, what would you give up for Zach Wilson? Or what do you think the trade value is for Zach Wilson? And they're like, I don't know. We'll give you a free stay at Marriott for Zach Wilson, or we'll put you up with Benzino and the Red Roof Inn.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Trey Lance at number 3. You could put him as due to be determined, but I don't see it either. He's played 8 games, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. That's been his games.
Yeah, so I would say the situation with Trey Lance is kind of how you would have to evaluate that, because with him being the 3rd overall pick, with him being the guy to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, kind of the weird allure that he created in that locker room, the drama associated with it, and then a 6th round pick took his, or a 7th round pick took his job in Brock Purdy. I think it's a bust because he was the 3rd overall pick. Even if he was just taken in the 2nd round and you didn't give up, I don't know, 3 picks to receive him. I think they gave the Dolphins 3 first round picks for him.
They gave what turned out to be Jalen Waddle, Bradley Chubb, and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Dolphins obviously won that trade.
Yeah, so you lost that trade, and then he's not on your team anymore. So I would say he's a bust just because of the context of that situation there.
Yeah, 100%. Now we have Kyle Pitts, number 4.
I mean, the guy who is supposed to be the next Calvin Johnson at tight end. I know Arthur Smith drafted him, and he doesn't really know how to use tight ends, but he was supposed to be the dude. He was supposed to be the guy. I should not see games where Jonnu Smith on your team outplays you. That cannot happen.
Yeah, no, I think he's to be determined, but he's edging towards at least a bust or at least a disappointment.
No, with tight ends and receivers, like the first few years, like this is not a guy, he can't block, first of all, and then he's a tight end who they really just need to put him at wide receiver. It's like, no, you're a bust. You're supposed to be the next Calvin Johnson. You're the 4th overall pick for a tight end, which is unheard of.
And you were also taking the pick before, Jamar Chase, who's you could say is the best wide receiver in the league, but you have to at least put him top 5.
Yeah, you have to at least put them top 5, and it's like, then this is where you get to if they're bust or not, because it's the context of where you were picked and who was picked after you. Imagine if the Atlanta Falcons had taken Jamar Chase. I don't want to, because I don't want to imagine Jamar Chase rotting away under a porous Arthur Smith system there. But Jamar Chase instantly went to Cincinnati, and then his rookie year, they go to the Super Bowl. And
Yeah.
then the next year, they go to the conference championship with him being one of the most dynamic receivers in the league.
Mhm.
He's like if Tyreek Hill came into the league with better route running.
Yeah. And plus, if you look at the next couple of picks, too, all of these guys are studs. The next pick being Jalen Waddle, who's a stud.
Better than Kyle Pitts
He's
so
a stud.
far.
Penei Sewell, who's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL and has been great for the Lions.
Yeah, Atlanta could have used someone like Penei Sewell
Yeah.
at number 4.
Number 8, the Carolina Teppers, J.C. Horn, who's a stud corner.
The Carolina Teppers. I mean, yeah, he's been a stud. I mean, all the defensive players in this draft were pretty good. It's really like Kyle Pitts, and then you have some quarterbacks, but like overall, like defensively, wide receivers, incredible draft.
Yeah, although ironically, the very next pick after J.C. Horn is Pat Surtain, who's better, I think.
Pat Surtain, it could depend on the system and just the coaching in Denver. I think J.C. Horn has been very good in Carolina, but like when you're getting up every day and David Tepper is your owner,
Doing
David
coke.
Tepper is throwing beers at people. The Carolina Panthers defense has been really good, but their offense has been straight up demoralizing. We had the Baker disaster. For some reason, they wanted a guy who could see ghosts in Sam Darnold, and it wasn't because of Kid Cudi and Kanye's mixtape. It was just him seeing actual ghosts.
Yeah. To round up the top 10, we have Devontae Smith as well. I think he's somebody who I don't think you can call a bust. I don't think you can put it to be determined, but I also don't think you could call him a draft hit either. He's been good for them.
Yeah.
I'll put him in I think he's a B category.
Who is drafted at receiver after him? Because I feel like there are better receivers in this draft than Devontae
for sure.
Smith.
We'll go through some of the wide receivers here. After him, later that draft, we have Justin Fields, who's about to be traded, Mac Jones, who just got traded for a bag of chips. But here are some of the wide receivers in this draft. I'll go through some of the notable ones. We mentioned Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. The very next wide receiver after him was the infamous Kadarius Toney, who single-handedly left the Chiefs off of your top 5 each and every week.
Yeah, he did. And then they benched him, and I put him back on my top 5.
Yeah. So single-handedly carrying down the dynasty. Rashad Bateman was also in the first round.
Ugh.
He's been average. He's been fine. Elijah Moore, who's now a Brown, he's fine. Rondell Moore, don't even know what to call him, to be honest.
Fast.
Yeah, fast.
It's like when they were talking. It's like when the Nelk boys interviewed Trump. They're like, "What do you think of OJ?" He was like,
Golf.
And that's like, "What do you think of Rondell Moore?" Fast.
We had Tutu Atwell in the second round. Josh Palmer, who Chargers fans are naive about. Let's see. Oh, third round pick, Nico Collins.
Nico Collins, absolute dog. I mean, 6'4", built like a rock, absolute stud.
Yeah, he was the 89th overall.
We got Dougie Mills in this draft too.
We did. For wide receivers, the most notable one who fell later in the draft, none of these other guys really notable. Right ahead of him, 109 overall was Dez Fitzpatrick, who had 5 catches for 49 yards in his career. 3 picks later, the Detroit Lions selected USC legend Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
With the 112th pick overall.
Yeah, and honestly, like, he's better than basically everyone. Like, you have Jalen Waddle, and I think I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown at this point over Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle's a little bit more fragile. He's not as tough, and he's not going to get those gritty catches that Amon-Ra does. So I think, honestly, I would go Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and then Devontae Smith if I'm ranking like the top 4 receivers in this draft. And then everyone else in the first round is kind of a miss for me. But like, as far as quarterbacks, this is one of the worst quarterbacks drafts I can remember. Like, this is not quite to the level of Jameis and Marcus Mariota yet, but after Trevor, it's like, okay, Mac Jones is traded. And then originally Bill Belichick wanted Davis Mills.
Yep. So this is I'll go through all the quarterbacks real quick. Zach Wilson, we already said was a bust. Trey Lance, we already said was a bust. Justin Fields, to be determined?
TBD.
Yeah, maybe he'll go somewhere else. He'll ball out. Mac Jones, I think his ceiling is like 15th overall quarterback. Like average.
I would say 20th.
Average at best. Kyle Trask. We didn't really see much of him. I think he's thrown 10 passes in his career. but
TBD.
he's a second overall pick. It doesn't really matter. Kellen Mond, he doesn't even play in the NFL anymore. He's gone. Dougie Mills. I mean,
He's okay.
He was in Houston where they didn't have all this talent around him. They had Nico Collins, but other than that, he didn't really have much help. So, I mean,
The Lovie Smith era. Like, what?
I think he's a good bridge quarterback.
I thought he was fine. Like, I thought he was like when Mike Glennon had like he had a few nice games there. I think like he's going to be like a Mike Glennon who he can go around, be a bridge quarterback for you. But I thought Dougie Mills is actually fine. And I think he'll be a good backup quarterback. But I think like if you're a team like the Jets or like Miami who needs a really solid backup quarterback, fancy Dougie Mills. He may be a solid backup and less expensive than Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and he was the 67th overall pick. Ian Book, who threw 12 passes and 3 of them were intercepted. And then the last quarterback in this draft was Sam Ehlinger. 3 for 3.
Wait, what'd you say about Ian Book? He threw how many passes and 3 of them were intercepted? For who?
The Saints.
Saints?
He threw 20 passes and 3 of them were intercepted, meaning 1 in every 6.5 passes were intercepted. And then we also have Sam Ehlinger, who was a part of that disastrous Frank Reich, Jeff Saturday, weird Colts season. Where he had 3 passes, 3 for 3, and then he threw 100 passes total. Running backs, real quick, we had Najee, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams as the big 3. And then we also had, later in the draft, Ramondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard, Elijah Mitchell, Khalil Herbert in the later rounds.
Bust. I will give that running back class a C-. Honestly, Najee Harris is the biggest edge of any running back I have ever seen. I mean, he'll like grind absolutely. It's the most painful 20 fantasy points I have ever seen with Najee Harris. I'm like,
such an edge.
Why does it look so hard? And then he'll suck for the first half of the year. And then at the end of the season, he'll look like one of the best running backs in the league. And it's like, nope. Can't do it with Najee Harris. Javonte Williams, get a new pair of knees, and maybe I'll consider it. Ramondre Stevenson had 1 good year for the New England Patriots. Last year, he didn't remember he had legs until they played the Buffalo Bills. And then after that, he got hurt. So, I don't know. Is he a Derrick Henry? No. Is he a Josh Jacobs? No. Jonathan Taylor? No. Go down the list. Ramondre Stevenson. Maybe he's like 10 in a top 10 running backs.
All right. And then I agree. So then lastly, the only real thing to stand out for this draft is the defensive players. Notable players included J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Greg Newsome. We also saw Asante Samuel Jr. in here. We also see Damar Hamlin's in this draft as well. Edge rushers, we see edge rushers suck too. Micah Parsons was in this draft. He was 13th overall. He panned out for them, obviously, at this point. Some defensive tackles, including Jonathan Marshall and Lee McNeil. Linebackers, Jeremiah Owasio-Carmoa, Nick Bolton, Pete Werner. So pretty decent defensive players in this draft. And then that's really this draft, mostly the wins are on defense, and everybody else kind of not really panning out.
Yeah, it's a really top-heavy receiver draft, and then you have Amon-Ra at the back. Not a good running back draft. It's okay at best, C- for me. And then, defense, definitely the strongest point in this draft. Maybe one of the worst quarterback drafts in the league. What we'll do is next week, probably just compare it to that Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota draft, because that's a fascinating one. And I don't remember any, good quarterbacks being taken after them. So maybe that's the draft we'll visit next week. But let us know if you like the draft segment where we recap and roast, especially players throwing 20 passes and 3 of them being intercepted. But overall, it was a fine draft. Good defenders.
Interesting.
Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle. A lot of Bama boys.
I feel like it's one of the only drafts where all the top 5 QBs, first of all, there was 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, which is one of the all-time highs. But also, none of them really living up to expectations. Zach Wilson was a massive bust. Trey Lance has been a massive bust. Mac Jones has been a disappointment. Justin Fields, they're moving on from him. Really, it's just Trevor, and Trevor still has a lot to prove himself. So things crazy here. Reports, my sources have come in with the Kirk Cousins deal, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, I want to hear it. Let's do a full Kirk Cousins segment on the show. We got breaking news that Kirk Cousins went to the Atlanta Falcons for 4 years.
4 years, $180 million with $100 million guaranteed.
What?
$180 million. So he's going to make $45 million. So he's
What
getting a bit of a raise.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Kirk, that could be robbery.
it could be.
That could be all-time robbery. I mean, Kirk Cousins, 35 years old at this point, 36.
34, 33 or something like
Yeah,
that.
right there in his 30s, coming off an Achilles injury, and then he's getting that guaranteed money again. I mean, Kirk Cousins keeps signing these deals, getting a lot of guaranteed money, switching scenes to Georgia, so now he's going to be in Atlanta. Didn't really see like the fit city-wise for him, but I think Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, you like that? Can we get over the hump now for the Atlanta Falcons? I'm really interested to see how this plays out because I feel like in a year or two, this will be a really good contract to revisit there. But like, do you see Kirk Cousins leading them to the top of that division? Because like a lot of question marks with the Saints. Buccaneers could get screwed in free agency cap wise. Let's see how they do with the new offensive coordinator. Tepperville, but Atlanta could be their year.
The Falcons, this should be their year. Last year, my biggest question marks going into the season was, can we believe in Desmond Ridder? There's pretty much only one fan that I can think of who are a supporter of Desmond Ridder, and those are the people who played and watched Cincinnati football before. But other than that, like, they have Kirk Cousins. I think he makes them better. They got the weapons around him. The offensive line is good. The defense is good enough. Can they do some stuff in free agency in the draft and hit some players on defense? Raheem Morris, I trust better than Arthur Smith. So they have to win their division. Their expectations now, you're paying Kirk Cousins $180 million. I don't think the deal is going to come back to bite them too badly, but this is your year. You have no excuse not to win your division. If Tampa beats you, that's fine, but the Saints should not sniff the division if you're there. Really, it's like you and the Bucs should be competing, and everybody else should just not even exist.
Yeah, I mean, if they win a playoff game, I think Kirk Cousins definitely deserves a feature on East Atlanta 4 on Gucci Mane's new album there. So potentially we'll get the "You Like That" in the background of one of those tracks, or maybe Run the Jewels. We'll take a sample there from one of Kirk Cousins' new trademarks phrase in Atlanta. But yeah, you have to win your division this year. Baker and the Bucs, it's like, okay, but you went 7-10, 7-10, 7-10, but now you get the offensive guy in the room in Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
You have the weapons there with Tyler Algier. You have the other running back. Can he figure out this Kyle Pitts mystery? And I think Kyle Pitts and Kirk Cousins should lock themselves in the lab for a week straight just to figure out that chemistry and make it work. I think Drake London gets elevated. So I think add another wide receiver for them. And then on defense, you have Raheem Morris. You hired a defensive head coach to fix those problems. So I think you are right in the mix now to be a team who can at least win a playoff game. And I think that should be the expectations for the Atlanta Falcons this year, because we thought Desmond Ridder, like maybe he could be a Kirk Cousins type figure. And then nope, that was not the case last year. And now we have an actual Kirk Cousins figure, but it's just going to be, can he come back from that injury, and will they get their hearts broken if he gets injured again? That's really my concern with this deal.
Yeah, I think that they should still go out and get a backup, because Desmond Ridder is not a good backup.
Yeah, I think credit to the Falcons, though, because like you're not like bad enough to draft a quarterback, and then you go out there and get the best possible quarterback in free agency. I heard the rumors there. Wasn't gonna believe it till I see it. I believe it now. He's on Atlanta. He's with the Birds now, so credit to the Falcons, though, for actually going out there and getting it done.
Yeah. No, I like this a lot for them, and I think they should be favorites in that division now at this point.
They should be. Yeah, you have to be, because Kirk Cousins is better than Baker. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. You now have better offensive weapons than the Tampa Bay Bucks. You have a more balanced offense there. So it's going to be a competitive division, but the Bucks, it's not like they were an impressive division winner last year. They did win a playoff game against the worst version of the Philadelphia Eagles we have seen in probably the last
20 years,
2 to 3 years at least, with the Atlanta Falcons, or with the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's like you did win a playoff game against a very wounded team, and you're at home in that game. But it's like the Bucks were good last year, but they were 9-8. They're a 9-8 playoff team.
Yeah, and they still had a lot of holes. Their offensive line wasn't great. Neither was their run game. So now they should be good.
Yeah. So credit to the Atlanta Falcons, went out there and got it done. But for the Charlotte Hornets, not the same can be said about you, because we went over the Washington Wizards last week, and I'm like, they couldn't have possibly be the worst franchise in NBA history, right? Then I went over, looked at the Washington Wizards. We were like, wow, Marcin Gortat led you guys in win shares 3 straight years. That's pretty tremendously bad. However, the Washington Bullets at least won a finals. You at least got to a second round consistently, and at least in the John Wall and Bradley Beal era, you're more competitive than the Kemba Walker and Al Jefferson era. Al Jefferson traded from the Celtics, goes to the Timberwolves, and then gets thrown over to the Charlotte Hornets. And then it's just been a team where Michael Jordan is there, I guess, but they just really haven't been able to do anything. And now we're going to go over the Charlotte Hornets' abysmal history and see if it's time for Adam Silver to step in and see if we think if their top 12 teams are going to be worse than the Wizards. So we've gone over the Pistons, we've gone over the Wizards, now we have the Hornets, probably the Magic coming up next year, and we're just going to create a tournament after this. And after we go over all the teams that we agree are some of the worst franchises in NBA history, then we'll go ahead and create a tournament out of it in a couple of weeks here. But Charlotte Hornets, abysmal. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think that they'll have a better top 12 all time, but I do think that their history is going to be worse because at least the Wizards were good in the Coke era. This team didn't even exist in the Coke era. So I believe, if I remember correctly, they started in the late 80s with the Heat. And with that, they had the Alonzo Mourning era, they had the Kemba Walker era, and now they're in the LaMelo Ball era. So that's really been their history, but I'm not entirely sure how their playoff success has. If I'm not mistaken, they've never made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and their history has been pretty mediocre to this point. Maybe not to the level of the Wizards, but I think just looking at it blindly, I think the Hornets, they have a good matchup against those Pistons and Wizards.
Yeah, so first of all, with the Charlotte Hornets, it's bad from the start because you start out as the Charlotte Hornets and then you're like, you know what? We don't want to be the Charlottes anymore. We're not feeling that punchy sting from that name. Let's go ahead. And then after we're the Hornets for a little bit here, the first year that they're the Bobcats is, let me take my sunglasses off to read, is in 2002. You go from the Charlotte Hornets and then it goes from 2004 to 05. You turn into the Charlotte Bobcats.
Forgot about that era.
You shouldn't have been Bobcats. You should have been Kitty Cats in that era because the best team you had in that era lost in the first round. You go basically your first 6 seasons without making it to the playoffs, and then you lose in the first round of the Eastern Conference Finals. And then you change your name back to the Hornets after being the Charlotte Bobcats, which makes no sense to me.
Which is hilarious because there was the New Orleans Hornets in that time. But the New Orleans Hornets is the Pelicans history, and the Pelicans history goes back to the Hornets. So how these mesh together, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
But the Bobcats era was heinous. I'm glad that they got out of the Cats era. Just anything, whether it be the Panthers, whether it be for a long period of time, the Seahawks in the 90s were really bad. Like just birds in general, especially
the Jaguars.
Just birds never pan out.
Yeah.
Or cats in this case.
Yeah, so basically the Charlotte when they were the Bobcats, though, they went to the playoffs 3 straight years was their best run. Lost in the first round. Then they had 2 years where they lost in the semis, where Paul Brown was the best player on their team. And then they also had Baron Davis. And then we go another couple years once we slid to the Hornets. And then we make it to the playoffs in 2009 and to 2010.
Where they lost in the first round.
We go 4 years missing the playoffs, and then in 2013 and 14, you go 43 and 39 with Big Al Jefferson and Kemba Walker at the helm there. End up getting swept by the Miami Heat, and then this is the first year that Steve Clifford is your head coach, and he coached the team for looks like 5 years to start it, and then you miss the playoffs again, then you make it back to the playoffs in 15-16 and you lose in the first round again, and then ever since then you have not made it back to the playoffs. And then we go Kemba Walker as your best player. He ends up leaving, goes to the Celtics, and then after he leaves, your top win share goes from Cody Zeller, like
Hornets legend
apparently, Cody Zeller, and then you go to Kemba Walker. You go to Terry Rozier after he signed there. Fine player, but should he be the best player on your team? Absolutely not. Then you have Mikal Bridges as the best player on your team as far as win shares. And then after him, Last season in 22 and 23, you have Mason Plumlee as your best player.
Sad.
And the worst part of the past 2 years is I haven't seen this happen in the NBA before, at least not in my timeline, but you go 4 years with the new head coach after having Steve Clifford for 5 years, and then you rehire him as your head coach.
That's never happened in my lifetime.
What dirt does Steve Clifford have on Michael Jordan?
I don't know. All I know is that let's look at the Steve Clifford era because I'm looking at very far away from here. I'm seeing that. Let's look.
So he
made 2 playoff appearances in 5 years, and he lost in the first round both times. And then his last season there,
they go 36 and 40. They go 36 and 46 back-to-back years. Then he gets fired.
And then they have a period of time with the new head coach. He gets fired, and then Steve Clifford comes back, and he goes
27 and 55 and 16 and 48.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if he's going to get fired again. They're going to replace him with Doc Rivers, and then he'll come back for the third time. Everybody knows that everyone loves a good trilogy, so maybe.
Yeah.
But 2 playoff appearances in 7 years. I don't know what he knows about Michael Jordan. I know Michael Jordan sold the team last year, but how do you hire a guy 2 times in the span of 5 years?
This is like, honestly, this is like if the Bengals hired Marvin Lewis after firing Zach Taylor, if they ever fired him. It's like the Bengals, much better franchise, but they're like, you know what? Marvin Lewis, it wasn't so bad, right? We just lost in the first round every single year.
Look, this is not a dating show, but give you a bit of advice here. If you and your girlfriend break up and there's a 5-year gap and you guys get back together, chances are it's not going to work out. You guys broke up for a reason.
Yeah.
So for this, you fire Steve Clifford because he was not the right guy. You gave him, 3 years of a breakup period where you guys just took a break from each other. You come back, and it's been worse since then. Some of these players who are still on the Hornets, still there. Whose idea was it to rehire him? Was it Michael J. Jordan? Who knows? All I know is that the Hornets are a disaster.
Yeah, the Hornets are a disaster there. And then, so they topped the Wizards, though, because they had 3 straight years of making the playoffs. So that was better than the Washington Wizards were able to do there. However, you rehire Steve Clifford. You've lost in the first round. At least the Wizards were good in the Coke era, and they won a championship as the Bullets. And at least they can have proven that they can get to a second round here. So now it's time that we've gone through our history lesson. We've gone through them getting back together with Steve Clifford. Let's see how good that top 12 really is. And at number 1, no surprise, maybe a surprise for some people, but Kemba Walker, UConn legend himself, as the best player in their history. Is that good? No.
That's better than the Wizards, though, right? You'd like to think, right?
No, I would take Bradley Beal in his prime over Kemba.
That's true. Bradley Beal was number 1. Well, he was also on the Hornets for like a decade, and it was just that period of mediocrity where they made, 3 playoff appearances? Kemba Walker as your 1, I'm not surprised, but let's see the rest of this list.
Yeah, and then we have Gerald Green, who on this list isn't in a Hornets uniform. He's in a Celtics uniform for some reason.
Oh, Jared Wallace.
Jared Wallace, sorry.
Jared Wallace. Yeah, I honestly forgot he existed. I remember him back in the day when I was watching basketball as a kid, but I do think of him as a Celtic. I don't think of him as a Hornet. So it's funny that we say that.
Yeah, he's like one of those hustle guys, though. Like, he had some like big games. He could get hot, but he was really just a big hustle guy. He was on the Bobcats, kind of a legend there, but like still not like someone who should be even your 3 on a championship team. So Gerald Wallace at 2. And then for all the short kings out there, we have Muggsy Bogues, who looks like if Grant Williams was shrunk in a lab, known as famously the shortest player in the NBA for a game that relies on height, not necessarily someone you want to be your 3rd best player of all time. Kind of like having Nate Robinson in your top 12 there. But for all the short kings out there, Muggsy Bogues, congratulations.
Hey, Muggsy Bogues, 5'3", legend here. We're talking about best shortest player of all time. If Michael Jordan was 5'3", could he be as good as Muggsy Bogues? That is a conversation that somebody somewhere has probably had. But that's Muggsy Bogues. I mean, if you want to play 2K and build the shortest team, Muggsy Bogues is probably going to be your starter.
Yeah, he's one of them, along with Draymond being your center. And then we have Larry Johnson, a top 4 guy and his name is Larry and his last name is not Bird, I'm all set.
How many win shares does he have?
How many win shares? 41.1.
Okay, so he's like
It's
a pretty
okay.
average player. That's when you think about the Hornets' time, we're gonna think about the Alonzo Mourning era, and we're gonna think about that time his number 2 being Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson, he was a fine player in the 90s, but by no means were they setting the world on fire, consistently making the first and second round. So forgettable person in history.
Yeah, forgettable player. And then at 5, we have Del Curry, who's known for being the father of Steph Curry. He was a good player, good shooter. Give him credit for having Steph Curry and being able to develop him to being one of the best players in NBA history. But I, I don't know. He's still like a spot up corner 3 guy. And see most of these older guys play, Del Curry included, but whew, not someone you want in your top 5.
Del Curry is a role player. And in his time, he was mostly a role player. He was more of like a shooter. He was kind of equivalent to like Steve Kerr on the Bulls
Yeah.
in the Spurs. Like he was a shooter, but him being your number 5, that shows, first of all, how long he was in the Hornets and also how bad the Hornets are historically.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, is Danny Green in the Spurs top 12? I'm pretty sure that is not the case.
No.
And then after that, we have the one and only, the legend in Charlotte himself, Cody Zeller at number 6. And I feel like him being in the top 12 players of all time, that's where this list should end. Because of Cody Zeller is at number 6 there, who looks like a balding math teacher. Like, what are we doing?
You know what he really is, though? He's a taller Alex Caruso. Tell me he doesn't look like Alex Caruso. If you took a double take, you're like, oh, is that Alex Caruso? Nope, another bald white boy.
Yeah, just put a headband on him. Yeah, another. What is with all these? Why are all the white guys coming into the NBA that are mediocre balding? Like, I don't get it. Like, Gordon Hayward has good hair, but like all like the role hustle players are all going bald. I don't get it. What is going on?
Austin Reeves, make sure you have a good hair transplant.
Yeah,
because right now you have precious locks, but it won't be like that forever.
It won't be like that forever. And it's like, so to make the NBA as a white guy now, you have to lose your hair. Is that the deal you have to make?
All right, I got to start losing my hair.
Yeah, time to start. Yeah, I guess it's time for me to cut my hair and look like I'm going bald. But let's roll through the rest of this list real quick. We have Anthony Mason at number 7.
Who was a draft bust.
Glenn Rice at number 8.
That was great in the 90s.
We have Marvin Williams. I mean,
another bust.
Another bust.
Part of one of the worst drafts in NBA history. I believe he was in the Andrea Bargnani draft. I'll double check that. Not a good player.
Yeah, and then we have let me see.
Is that Emeka Okafor?
Emeka Okafor here.
The cousin of Jahlil Okafor.
At number 11.
And then I think ends it's Alonzo.
Yeah. Why is Alonzo Mourning at the end? Was he just old there at the end of his career? It's like a last deal?
I think he just left. I'm pretty sure. I don't know the full history. I just know Alonzo Mourning. When you think of the Hornets like great players, I think of Alonzo Mourning. But he did leave to go to the Heat and did a lot more there than there.
Yeah. I mean, Miami, definitely a better place to be there, but better franchise. But the Charlotte Hornets, gone over it. Absolutely disastrous franchise. It is now time for Adam Silver to take a legitimate look and see what is wrong with the Hornets and potentially go over them, rebranding, selling the team, investigating why Steve Clifford was drafted twice, and then seeing why they can't draft good players in their top 12. I don't get it, but
you know what's funny? As I looked up Alonzo Mourning's career, he only spent 3 years with the Hornets. But yet, he's who I think of when I think of the Hornets. They only had 3 years with him where he was a 2-time All-Star and he was second in the Rookie of the Year his first year. But other than that, they traded him pretty quickly to the Heat, and that's where he spent most of his time, also winning a championship with them.
Oh, so it's their fault. They traded him, or did he request a trade?
I'll look at the lore while we're here, but yeah, that's I thought of Alonzo Mourning a lot differently then, but I believe they traded him because he didn't spend much time there whatsoever. Also, while I was looking through the notes here, I did get some more breaking news.
Okay.
The Packers, after signing Josh Jacobs, have decided to cut Aaron Jones.
They cut him?
They cut Aaron Jones.
Jeez.
Saving some money. So now Josh Jacobs is a Packer without Aaron Jones. Now opens the door for a Farm Simulator to make a reunion. But overall, like, how much of a jump is it from Aaron Jones to Josh Jacobs?
I think Aaron Jones is a better running back, or at least he's a more diverse running back, and I've seen more consistent greatness from Aaron Jones, because Josh Jacobs, he did have a career year, but he struggled to get back into a rhythm last year. Could that be because of the holdout? That's not really an excuse, because if you're an elite player, you're getting paid to be one of the best running backs in the league. Play like it. So I think
Yeah.
that's point number one. And then Aaron Jones, I've seen him in multiple playoff games be the best receiver on the field and the best running back and dice teams up. So I think this could be a downgrade. However, Aaron Jones is getting a little bit older, so you're at the point where you don't really want to give him that much money. So I like the respect that they have for him. Like, okay, we'll cut you, go out there, get your last bag, and then good luck to you. But I think Josh Jacobs there is not going to be a huge drop off, but it's definitely going to be a drop off in that pass game out of the backfield.
I think he has a higher ceiling, but I feel like he's more inconsistent. So it kind of balances it out. You're kind of getting younger, but you're also getting more inconsistent play out of him.
Yeah, because AJ Dillon's kind of like a similar player to Josh Jacobs, but he's also inconsistent. Like, he had a really good year, then it's kind of so year after that, and then had a lot of injury issues last year. So they're probably going to draft a running back if I had to guess.
Yeah. As far as the Hornets' top 12, do you think that their top 12 players is worse than the Wizards?
Ooh, probably. I don't know, because Marcin Gortat led them in win shares in 3 years. So it's like something where I'd have to like compare them like side by side or play some games of 2K and simulate it there. But like at least the Hornets, like Kemba Walker is their leader in win shares. Then someone like Al Jefferson, who at least has a pulse, was a leader in win shield. But like Marcin Gortat, another balding white guy leading you in win shares, like I don't love that. But I also think if we had a game versus the Wizards in Hornets all time, I think the John Wall and Bradley Beal era would be good enough to top this team.
Yeah, I just feel like, the Hornets, I feel like there's more players you recognize here, but some of these guys you recognize are like, oh, wow, remember when Cody Zeller was on the Heat? Remember when Alonzo Mourning was on the Heat? Remember when Gerald Wallace was on the Celtics?
Yeah.
Del Curry, remember when his son was the MVP? Remember when his son was a role player? Like, a lot of these players are just players that you either can forget about in history or guys who were better elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely guys who are better elsewhere. But like overall, I think the Hornets are the worst franchise here, because at least the Wizards could get to the second round here. And then they have that iconic Paul Pierce moment, which is probably the best moment in Wizards history. And then the Bullets are a better team than the Bobcats. So if we're going, who's better, Bobcats or Bullets? Definitely the Bullets. They won a championship fueled by cocaine and 8 balls there. And then the Hornets, like, they can't really decide what they want to do. And they brought back Steve Clifford.
After he already left.
Yeah.
And was not good there.
Yeah, after he wasn't a good head coach.
Yeah. That's a mess. That doesn't make any sense to me. That would be like if the Browns, although it's very less severe, but if the Browns brought back Hugh Jackson after firing Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Why are you going back to your ex who was clearly worse? So, the Hornets. Fight it on the comments. Figure out who we should do next for the Hornets. Which other team should we make fun of? You let us know.
Yeah, you let us know there. But going over the Pistons, probably have the best history between the Wizards and Hornets. They're just so abysmally bad, but they've had the most playoff success. They had the Isaiah Thomas era. So that team would probably be any of the Wizards or Hornets teams. So they're probably the 1 seed right now in our tournament of bad teams right now. But that's pretty much the Hornets history. And then we have also, it was announced that Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are going to be fighting in Cowboys Stadium, and it's going to be streaming on Netflix. And the biggest question that everyone has is, why? No one wants to see this.
No, I mean, Mike Tyson hasn't fought since 2005. He is 57 years old. Meanwhile, Jake Paul, I believe, is 27 and in his prime.
28,
ideally.
yeah.
28, yeah, whatever. And you're beating up Mike Tyson. Now, if this was 1998, oh my God, would this have been an amazing fight? You get prime Jake Paul and somewhat prime Mike Tyson. This would have been an absolute duel. This would have been up there with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao or Conor McGregor, whoever you want to say. But now, this is just mean. This is harassment. This is ageism, if I've ever heard it. First of all, Mike Tyson, think about what he's done since he was at his peak, when he beat Buster Holyfield and he bit somebody's ear off, right? Since then, he has done so many drugs. And God forbid, hey, this isn't a diss on Mike Tyson. He's a legend. across it. The Hangover. We love him. Mike Tyson. Great. He is one of the greatest, even if he can't pronounce the greatest. But he's 57. And Jake Paul is 28 years old. And they're beating up on a man who is 30 years older than you, who has done every drug in the book, who is definitely washed at this point. No offense to Mike Tyson. Who wins here? Jake Paul. His ceiling is, hey, I beat up on a 57-year-old old man who was peaking in the 90s. And if I lose, I lost to a guy who peaked in the 90s, who's done every drug in the book, who's known for punching and owning a tiger. And then Mike Tyson, what does he win? Money. That's it.
Yeah. Mike Tyson would win the internet if he knocks out Jake Paul. So, like, if Mike Tyson wins, he wins. If Jake Paul wins, they're like, why are you fighting a 57-year-old Mike Tyson? And then we just had an article pulled up here that says he did a 30-second pad session, just hitting pads there. And then he told Joe Rogan the video that Jake Paul had posted to promo the fight. And then everyone's like, oh, Mike Tyson, like everyone's saying he's 57-year-old, but like, look at this video. Look how good he looks. Then Mike Tyson came out and was like, that was from 4 years ago. And then even Mike Tyson is showing like, I am just doing this for the bag. And he's like, after that, I was bedridden for a week after I hit pads. That's how sore he was. And it's like, for Jake Paul, it's like, okay, you're someone who says you want to be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. However, you just beat up a Uber driver, and then your most impressive knockout was against Andre August, so that was cool. And then you couldn't knock out Nate Diaz. He went the whole fight with you, and then you win that in a split decision. You fight Tyron Woodley. You fight an old Anderson Silva. It's like you're fighting all these retired boxers, and it's like, are you just trying to give all of your heroes a payday? Because that's what it looks like. It's like Jake Paul is getting all of these guys paid and one last big paycheck. So, like, I don't know if Mike Tyson is in debt, but who wants to see this? Like, Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul is one thing, because Floyd is still in his prime, can dodge, hold up Logan Paul in that fight, but like, no one wants to see Mike Tyson get knocked out by Jake Paul. I mean, I don't think Mike Tyson is still like has the spring to knock out Jake Paul, but like, it's a lose-lose for Jake. It's like, big event. You'll make some money on Netflix, sure. But everyone is kind of like, we don't want to watch an old Mike Tyson get beat up or knocked out. It makes you look like a monster. It makes you look like an elder abuser. I don't know if you had an abusive grandfather or what your beef with old people is, but you just keep knocking out senior citizens. And if you don't look good versus a 58-year-old boxer, it's like, this is a can't win situation for Jake Paul. I get the business aspect of it, and it sounds cool, but then when you actually think about it for more than 5 seconds, you're like, this is a dumb idea.
This is a really dumb idea. The only thing that is potentially market moving is the fact that it's going to be streamed on Netflix rather than having the pay-per-view, because obviously Netflix is going to get influx of subscriptions from it. But at the same time, it comes back to the fight itself. First of all, I don't think the fight's going to be very long, especially if he fought for 30 seconds and was gassed 4 years ago. Yeah. Obviously, he's going to train, and obviously it's going to be a little bit better, but he's 58 years old. And Logan and Jake Paul, he's been fighting all these boxers who are at least somewhat in the loop of boxing. Mike Tyson, I know he's in debt. Was notoriously terrible with his money when he was making hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think it's honestly just for money, and it's just for clicks. And you know what? All the power to him, but this is not going to be a good fight.
No.
But we'll cover it.
Yeah, we'll cover it. But it's like, Jake Paul, it's like, if you want to be a legit boxer, stop fighting senior citizens. Stop fighting UFC fighters, because it's a completely different style. When you did fight Tommy Fury, who's a undefeated boxer, you didn't win. It went to a split decision there. So at least try and get that rematch going. But like, I don't know. This may be a fight. I don't know if it's going to be a boxing fight or what they did with Floyd Mayweather with Logan Paul, and they'll call it like an exhibition match, which is probably going to be the case. But yeah, no one wants to see an old Mike Tyson get knocked out. And then the only upside is if he knocks out Jake Paul, but that is upside for Mike Tyson. Then Jake Paul's like career as a boxer is over. Like, oh, you lost to a 58-year-old Mike Tyson. What a joke.
Yeah.
But this is definitely just a money ploy. So it's like, okay, do your streaming on Netflix, sell out a football stadium, or give enough tickets away to fill up a football stadium. And then heavier good bout with Mike Tyson, I get, but I'm just like, it's a name recognition, but I don't want to. No one wants to watch this.
No, this is going to be pretty terrible to watch, but we'll watch it anyways, and I guess that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, I guess that's why they're doing it, but people will talk about it. It'll build some hype with Jake Paul. But if you want to take your boxing career seriously, I just don't want to see Jake Paul like, wow, did you see me hang in there against one of the best boxers of all time? It's like gonna be like how he spin it. He's gonna be like, I should make the Hall of Fame. I beat Mike Tyson, and like how he like spins it around. I beat a champion in UFC. I lost to Tommy Fury, but it's like, no, you beat a 58-year-old.
You beat a
Congratulations.
guy who, if the age gap of when he was in his prime was a person, they'd be able to buy an alcoholic beverage. It has been over 21 years since he even fought at this point.
Yeah.
So who are you really proving to anybody? That you beat up on a washed, old boxing icon? Sure. He was great in the 90s. He was great when OJ was still a color commentator. Who do you win? Nobody wins. So
Yeah.
next fight OJ. He's 74. He's right in your age bracket. Go in and fight the juice and see how you do. He's a killer after all.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
go ahead. Fight OJ there. I think that would be good. But overall, I don't know. Do you want to see this? And like, let us know in the comments if you actually think this is it, or if Jake Paul should be investigated for elder abuse. But we were able to preview the North. We did go over every big free agency situation throughout the show as the news dropped, talked about the new quarterbacks there. And you can go back, subscribe, see all the links to the videos below. But most importantly,
Stay brick.